بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Okay, so prayer times, we did this. Okay, so just want to go on a tangent, inshallah, on the issue of validity and invalidity. So we say that these prayers in the forbidden time are invalid, right? They are sinful and invalid. So I just want to remind ourselves of this important system. It's an usuli discussion, and it's an usuli discussion, but it's very relevant to fiqh, right? Does anyone have the reliance of the travel with them?
I do not. I don't think so. No.
Okay. Ben, if you
I
look
have
at
the soft copy.
okay, if you have the soft copy, if you look into contracts, right, try and find the section where it says contracts. So you should look in the index or the contents. It says contracts that are sinful and valid, contracts that are sinful and invalid. You could just try and find that for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
So we have prohibition. Okay, how to interact with prohibition. So a prohibition can either prohibit the action itself, right? Or it could be essential, meaning we're talking about the action itself, like theft. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah forbids theft, it's not just saying don't do it. It's saying it doesn't count. When Allah forbids zina, right? It's not just it's haram, but it doesn't count. What do you mean it doesn't count? Meaning it doesn't have any repercussions. Like it's not a valid thing. So what do you mean it doesn't have repercussions? Like, so uh like if you have can a man have a child through zina? The answer is no for the Shafis. It doesn't count. It's not recognized. I prayed after Asr, not recognized. I prayed without wudu, not recognized. Like you just didn't do it, right? So it could either be something that's essential, right? The prohibition is essential, meaning it's talking about the essence of the action. The action itself is prohibited. Let me just rephrase that, right? The action itself is essentially prohibited. And then the action is not in itself prohibited. Rather, an aspect of the way the action has been done is prohibited. Okay. So when you say when it's haram to pray after Asr, what do you mean? It's haram to pray, or it's haram to pray after Asr? So it's haram to pray. It's haram to pray, period. Like praying is like worshiping an idol? No. Okay, so then prayer is not essentially forbidden, then, is it? The action is not itself prohibited, rather an aspect of the way the action has been done is prohibited. Okay. Now, now we can break it into two categories. I cannot see the image. Okay, I see it now, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't come up in that. So you're gonna have to go look under. Um, what does it say? Look under. If you look under undercutting another's deal, somewhere along there in the book itself, it should say prohibited transactions that are sinful but valid. Right? You should be able to right. Try and look there, inshallah. Under so somewhere next to 4K 4.7. Okay, so now we can break this. We can break this into two different categories. Okay. Coincidental. And see. Peculiar. Okay. So what's coincidental? I'm praying, and as I was praying, I noticed someone was behind me. So I changed my qira'ah, may Allah protect us all, to make it sound a bit more religious. Right? I usually recite one verse, I recited 2 pages. Right? So I was showing off in the prayer. Okay, so is the prayer itself forbidden?
No.
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 Is showing off in religious matters peculiar and unique to prayer?
No.
Y y no.
So the sin of showing off and showing myself as more religious, could I do that outside of the prayer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's merely coincidental. So I'm going to give an example here, showing off in prayer, right? Showing off in prayer, may Allah protect us all. Okay. Okay, what about when I'm praying? I'm praying, and as I'm praying, somebody comes behind me and he makes a really weird sound. And I'm like, oh, that guy's so disgusting in my head. I wish that person would die. So making riba in my head about somebody and having ill will, does that, does it, is that, that's coincidental, right? Right. So
Yes.
a riba of the heart during prayer, right? So while I'm praying, I'm doing something haram, but it's just merely coincidental. Okay. Okay. What about praying? Okay, a woman fasting without permission of husband, or woman going on Hajj without permission. So this is a Sunnah Hajj, for example, or whatever.
You're asking if it's coincidental?
Yeah, is that true? Or is that so so when we say a woman cannot fast without her husband's permission, are we saying that fast is essentially wrong?
Like
No,
it doesn't count?
No, I'm asking if Allah forbids a woman to fast without the permission of her husband, is Allah telling us that their fast is essentially forbidden?
no,
Yes.
It's essentially forbidden. The fast itself in it because it's a fast.
No, no.
So why is it forbidden then?
because there is no permission.
There's no permission. Okay. Is that coincidental? So what is the haram that she's doing?
Act of ibadah, which might jeopardize her duty to her towards her husband.
Okay. Could she do that self same sin in another way?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
sure.
what we see here is just a mere coincidence of two action, an obligatory or a sunnah action, okay, happening next to a sinful action. They're just coinciding, right? A woman leaving her house without permission and a woman going on Hajj, they're coinciding, right? A man going on Hajj when he has debts and his creditors don't allow him to leave. They say, no, you got to work and pay me off. He's like, no, I'm going to go for 3 months and come back. And the creditors say no, and so he just goes anyway. So his delaying paying back a debt while being capable is one thing. His Hajj is something else. They just simply coincided. Okay. Selling alcohol, selling weapons, right, to a murderer, right? So this is helping somebody do the haram, helping somebody do the haram, and selling a weapon at the same time, just coinciding. Could you help somebody do the haram in other than a sale? Yes. I could tell him where to buy it. I could help him. I could drop it off. I could do all sorts of things. So it's just coincidental because it's not peculiar to the action. Okay, let's look at something that's peculiar to action. Okay, and similarly for the Shafi'is, wudu with stone and water. Right? So the water, you don't have the right to use that water. So every single time you put water in your face, you're doing something sinful, but it's wajib at the same time. Is it? Yeah, just two actions coinciding. Outwardly, outwardly it's one action. Inwardly it's two actions. It's just coinciding. That's all. Okay, but something that's particular to an action, fasting on Eid. So the sin of fasting on Eid, could it be achieved outside of fasting? No. In fact, if you didn't eat on Eid, it's fine. But you just can't fast on Eid, right? So the fast is not prohibited in itself, nor is it something that coincides, but rather it is unique. The sin of fasting on Eid can only be done through fasting. Okay? Praying after Asr. You can't do the sin of praying after Asr in anything other than praying. So it's not merely coincidental, right? It's not merely coincidental. It is, nor is it essential. You can't say the prayer is essentially forbidden. Rather, the action is not in itself prohibited, rather an aspect of the way that the action has been done, and that way is peculiar to, I think the word is peculiar to, not particular to. Let me open this again. Peculiar to it, not particular to it. It's right, unique to it. Fasting on Eid, praying after Asr, lending with interest. But you cannot do the sin of lending with interest outside of lending. It's not possible,
No,
right? So,
no, yeah.
so here, if you look at this is a contract, and this is a contract. What if I lent you money to buy drugs? That would be coincide. The lending and helping somebody do haram coincides. Well, here this is This is inseparable, right? You couldn't do the sin of lending with interest in anything other than lending. So therefore, this is peculiar to the action, right? It's not essential to the action, but it is peculiar to it, right? So what's the difference in those two? If you think about, again, this is logic. Or I say something, I say like laughing. Is laughing essential to a human? No, it's not. You could be human without laughing. Okay, but is it unique to a human? Yes, it is. So the khasa'is of a human being. So it is unique to it. Okay. Fasting on Eid, praying after Asr, lending with interest. Um, and then there's things that are debated. Selling slave girl, a bondswoman, without her child. Right, so the Prophet ﷺ forbade us to separate mothers from children. You can't do that, right? So you can't do that with humans. You can't do it with animals either, right? You've got, if the chick is old enough to be by itself, it's fine. Like, here's an egg that you just buy an egg and it's just fertile. It's not the same thing. But let's say, for example, a newborn lamb, you can't separate it from the mother. You could kill them both. You could eat a newborn lamb, that's fine. And with the mother, you can kill them both. But you can't just have the newborn mother like that, a newborn lamb just like that. Can't separate them. So here, this is something that is a debate in the Shafi school. Do we say that separating the mother from the child is something that is coincidental to the contract, right? So I sold Badr, here's the mother, and I sold the child, the baby, to somebody else, right? Can I do that? So we all know that's haram, and may Allah protect us, right, and give us rahmah. But you did that. Is the contract valid? Yes, because it's analogous to, it's two different things: selling property plus causing emotional and physical harm. That may be coincidental. Maybe I could put the child in one place and the mother in another place without selling them. Don't let the mother see the child, maybe. Right. So it's coincidental, or according to the relied upon position, it is a particular. In reality, here it's a bit of a technical thing, is that we say the relied upon position is that it's invalid because it's analogous to selling one half of a sword. So why can't I sell one half of a sword? Let's say I get a pencil, right? I have a pencil in my hand right now. And I say, Badr, I'll sell you half of this pencil. Right? So if I cut the pencil in half, like how can you use it? Can't really use half of a pencil, can you? Or half of a sword. A sword doesn't have a use if it's half of it anymore. Or half of a cellular phone. Right? I'm gonna get a cellular phone, cut it in half, I have half, you have half. You can't do that. So we say, even if Badr and Free didn't mind, it would be haram and invalid to sell him half the phone because the Sharia doesn't allow him to break the phone. So therefore it's invalid. Because it's itlaf al-mal, it has no use anymore. So similarly, we say the same, the relied upon position in the Shafi school is it's invalid because the Sharia doesn't it's undeliverable, so to speak, in that the Sharia doesn't allow you to deliver it, right? يمكن التسليم والتسلم. Now the problem is I could say the same thing about selling weapons to a murderer. So it's undeliverable, right? And in reality, that's what the Hanbalis say. So we have a problem, which is we might have our usul down, but when we apply it, we have different answers. So here, the Shafi school, we have different answers. Here, the Hanbalis as well, they say that's invalid for the same kind of reason. Here as well, praying after Asr, the Malikis put over here. They agree with us in this breakdown that this is invalid, and this is valid, and this is invalid, right? The Hanafis, they have a slightly different breakdown, but the Shafi'is, we say invalid, invalid, valid. And we're going to continually be discussing things. Is it this category or is it that category? Is it this category or is it that category? Right? That's what we're going to be doing. Is it something that's peculiar to the action or is it not? Right? That's our discussion in fiqh. But when we get to it, we're gonna disagree on the specifics. Right? Now, importantly, in the Shafi school, this applies to whether it's makruh or whether it is haram. So we have a debate in the Shafi school. Is it makruh to pray after Asr or is it haram to pray after Asr? And we call it al-awqat al-makruha, the makruh times. One position says, yes, it's haram, so therefore end of discussion. The other position says it's makruh. But then because it's makruh, it's still prohibited. And if it's prohibited, it's still invalid. And if it's invalid, it is haram. So the two positions end up being the same practically, but from different roots. One is to why it's just not being valid to begin with. The other one is being not recognized by Sharia, therefore not valid. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. It's a very important. This is again all these kind of things. This is the flow of a discussion. So again, I come along as a Salafi and I say Quran and Sunnah, and you're like, bro, like, where have you been for the last 1,000 years? You're like, yeah, I'm Quran and Sunnah. Say, well, Quran and Sunnah, what? Like, can you do this stuff? Like, we've been doing this for 1,000 years, right? And we also have useful discussions, right? So there will be useful comparisons between the Shafi'i and Maliki because we actually have the same usul on some issues. So you will see it in our book. Sometimes they're quoting the Malikis and they might be quoting us. It's a fruitful discussion, right? For me to have with a Maliki, is it valid to pray after Asr? Because essentially we have the same usul on this issue, right? Now I come along with a Hanafi and I start debating it. It's not useful. We don't have the same usul. So this is the problem again with Salafi fiqh. Salafi fiqh is welcome, right? All of us, we see ourselves as Salaf. But when you come along and start having a discussion with me and you really have no idea what we're talking about and you just like, it's Quran and Sunnah. Like, what does the Quran and Sunnah say about this breakdown? Oh, it says this. I mean, according to some people it says this, according to some people it says that. It's not that simple. Right. And even with the Hanbalis, they say in principle, they say that the coincidental is also invalid. Okay, but it's not really that simple for them because they break this into worship and non-worship. Right? So again, I'm just coming along Quran and Sunnah. I mean, there's a huge tuhma there. There's a huge accusation that assuming that none of us were following the Quran and Sunnah, which is again provable from some points of view that, oh, they went against this hadith or whatever, but very, very difficult on a bigger picture. And then two, you come along and just kind of like you just it's yulakhbit, that's the phrase in Arabic. Like you're just like just walking around like a crazy man, like you have no system. You don't even know what we're talking about. Right? So we have everyone has a system. Work within that system, right? So you will find particularly some Saudi Salafis, they know this stuff, right? They are they're Hanbali, and they work within the Hanbali fiqh, right? So Ibn Uthaymeen, generally speaking, Hanbali, working within Hanbali fiqh. He has a commentary on Ibn Rajab's book on Qawaid al-Fiqh. So like all of this stuff is there in his head. He's a Hanbali, right? He was strong in Arabic grammar and all these kind of things. So it's like you're not totally crazy, you're not totally insane. Some of the things he said were off and they don't reflect Hanbaliism, but at least there's a system as opposed to somebody just like insane. Like, what are you talking about? Quran and Sunnah. What is that? Right? So the person is just totally like lost on what you're talking about. Right? It's like I do coding. How do you do coding? Or what? Like imagine somebody says I don't use any coding system. Like, well, how do you do coding then? Just code, bro. Just get the job done. Mr. Effective. You should hire me now. Yeah, but which coding language do you use? Bro, it's just code. Right? Within 3 seconds, the guy has no idea. Right, so that nobody is trying to. So this is a very interesting kind of. I always try and summarize my points into the most pithy and concise things. Is the need of the mujtahid to have a madhab is far greater than the muqallid. Does that make sense? the need of the mujtahid to have a madhab is far greater than the muqallid. Right? If I'm somebody who is not doing research, if I'm somebody who's not doing research, and I say, bro, is this halal? You say, well, someone says it's halal. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So let's say, for example, I ask somebody and he gives me a fatwa from the Zahiri madhab. Okay, and today I follow the Zahiri madhab on some issue. And tomorrow I follow the Maliki's issue on some issue. And the Hanafi is like, it's not really the end of the world too much. Nobody cares what I do as long as it's not affecting somebody else. It's like, I mean, it is a moral problem to some extent, but not a huge moral problem. Right? At the end of the day, ask the scholar, end of story. Now, the researcher, the mujtahid, who's trying to come to a conclusion, he is ahwaj. He has a greater need to follow a madhab than anybody else. Why? Because he needs to have more systems in place. It's like I want Google to search without a logarithm. It cannot search without a logarithm. Doesn't make any sense. He needs ashbah wa nadha'ir. He needs to have lots and lots of data in his head, right? So, when you ask AI to draw a picture, it follows a system, right? So you gave the input, you said, I want you to draw a picture of a little girl crying, okay, in a dark room. Now, if it doesn't have lots and lots and lots and lots of data, it cannot create it. And if it doesn't have a system, it has a system, it has a program system how to do it, how to choose things, it cannot choose things. Right? So when the mujtahid, the person who is finding an answer independently, thinking independently, it needs a madhab, needs a system, right? More than the muqallid, right? And that's what you have the quote, al-muqallid al-amila madhaba lahu, right? There's a principle in fatwa. We say like the guy on the street doesn't have a particular madhab. It's okay. Like, today we gave him a Maliki thing, tomorrow Shafi is not the end of the world, right? Because he's not, Whereas for the researcher, you give me an answer now. You better have either like you it's just either you're giving an answer from a madhab or you're working directly with Quran and Sunnah through a lens, through a system. So you have to have all these things in your head. Otherwise, you're very, very dangerous. You're driving. It's a huge problem. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So again, like Badr gets married. He gets married in the Hanafi school. Okay, and then he prays as a Shafi. He's like, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to come and say, hey, you're inconsistent. I mean, I could morally, right? I could come along and say you're inconsistent, morally inconsistent, because this conclusion results in this. But it's like, I mean, I'm not really morally inconsistent. I went to do two specialists and they gave me an answer, and I'm following a specialist in this and specialist in that. So it's like somebody who says, I follow Chinese medicine when it comes to certain health issues, but allopathic medicine when it comes to other health issues. Like, is that actually inconsistent? Yes. Is it a problem? Not really. It's not the end of the world, is it? When it comes to my depression, I don't like allopathic approach at all. I'm not going to take any of this medication. Forget all of this. I'm going to do something else. But when it comes to um you know something else, I'm going to go straight to the trauma room, not a problem. And, ER, that's it. And whatever they give me, they'll take. Right? It's not the end of the world. Now, as a system, that doesn't make sense. Like as a philosophy, like how the health service of a country works, that doesn't really make sense I mean, unless you got to have a bit more, it's got to be a bit more refined because it doesn't really make sense that you're going to spend taxpayers' money on two systems and one system, one contradicts the other. Like that doesn't really make sense unless you can do it in somewhat of a nuanced way. But for the researcher, right, I am researching a particular drug and I start going off halfway through the research, I'm following one system and then I start going allopathic medicine, then Chinese medicine. That makes no sense whatsoever. Like no sense. Like does nobody's going to accept that research paper. It doesn't make any sense. Right? Or I'm going to apply the statistics, right? You know, when they do medical research, the statistics, you apply it in a certain way or another way. There are different madhabs in how you apply the statistics that you're going to need to prove something. And so you're going to put A and B. You can't do A and then B halfway through it. That's inconsistent, right? And this is a good way as well to tell somebody who knows somebody or not. So as you say that they're Hanbali. So ask a Hanbali, say, tell me this diagram, right? Explain this diagram to me, right? And you will find out very quickly that they have no clue what's going on. Because the Hanbalis, if you have a very loose understanding of Hanbali fiqh, they will tell you all of this is invalid. In reality, it's not all invalid. This is invalid for a certain reason, another reason. This one I'm not sure, right? But you'll find other things, for example, contracts, that there are haram contracts that are in this category. And so, Azhar, if you could share some of the examples in Rise of Traveler about contracts. You shared it in the chat.
I don't think he's here anymore.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so in the Shafi school, for example, we talk about a najash, right? A najash is when you have an auction, okay, and you tell your buddy that you try that to keep putting the price up, to keep bidding whenever the other guy bids, right? So Badr is there and I'm there, and there's this, and Yusr is there, for example, and Badr knows that Yusr wants this car, right? So whenever she says 10, I say 11, 10 and a half. And then she says 11, I say 11, and I say 11, 11 and a half. She says 12, and I say 12 and a half. She says 13, and then that's it, sold. Now she could have bought it for 10, right? But I kept putting it up. Now, the agreement is between Badr and I is that I'm going to get whatever is above 10, I'm going to get half of it. So he made money and I made money. Okay? And if she backs out, khalas, it's not a real sale. He sold it to me and it's just a game anyway. It's not a big deal. So this is called being a stooge, right? So this is haram but valid. Why is it valid? Right? The Prophet forbade it, but he did not forbid selling, right? And so we say, is being a stooge, is this particular to the action or is it coincidental? So it's coincidental. Okay, where's the coincidence here? Basically, I gave her the sense that there were other people who wanted it and its value was greater. I'm sorry. Could I have done the same thing without getting in the contract? Yeah. I could have told her, "Oh my God, you should buy this. This is really, really good," and da, 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 as a lie, right? You can do that, right? It's worth 15. If you can get it for less than 15, buy it. And she's like, "Oh wow, I got it for 13." She comes and tells me, "Hey, good job." Ripped you off, right? And so ripping somebody off in the Shafi school is valid, right? I I lied to you. I said this is normally sold for 15. I'll sell it to you for 13. And she goes and finds out that it's to a 10. She said, "What?" So in the Shafi school, that's valid, and we say it's coincidental. Like the harm that you did to somebody is coincidental. It is not particular, not peculiar to the action, nor is it essential to the action. Right? At the end of the day, she bought a car for a price. She knew what she was buying. There's a price, khalas. So it's not essentially prohibited, but it is coincidentally prohibited. So the Hanbalis say that's valid, but they have a right to cancel. We say they don't have a right to cancel. Well, in some scenarios we do. Um, but the right to cancel is something else. The point is that it was a contract. Like it was a valid contract, as opposed to invalid contract. So the Hanbalis, for example, they will have nuances when it comes to these issues. We say, for example, if you were walking to Jum'ah and you stopped, okay, the second adhan of Jum'ah has gone, right? It is now Jum'ah time. The Imam is on the minbar, and you stop and go and buy something. Your buying has delayed you from going to Jum'ah. Therefore, it is haram, but it's totally valid because delaying from Jum'ah could be done in all sorts of ways. So when the Prophet ﷺ forbade selling during the khutbah, we say it means delaying. So you could so it's not essential to the sale, nor is it unique to the sale. I could delay through just being lazy. I could delay for all sorts of things, right? Similarly, I could actually sell during the khutbah. So I'm here, and there's a guy next to me. I show him the candy, and I put my fingers three, and he sees it as three. He understands that I'm selling it for $3. He gives me $3. We were listening to the khutbah the whole time, right? So we can say, "Oh, makruh, don't do that. You should focus in the khutbah." Khalas, right? So we say it's nothing to do with the sale. It's to do with delaying coming to the khutbah. So it's not unique to the sale. It's just coincidental. So if it's haram, haram, but it's still valid, right? It's still valid, right? Between us and the Malikis, we mentioned praying after Asr, right? For the Malikis, they say it's makruh and valid. We say it's makruh, therefore invalid, right? But we have the same system there. Okay, I wanted to bring some examples of this, an example of this problem in reality. So again, the Salafi fiqh is easy because you don't have to talk about these discussions. So it sells easily, but that doesn't make it actually right. Um, I'm gonna find this quote here. In usul, actually, not in fiqh. 1 second. So I'm talking about this not because we want to go into usul and all this discussion, but it does come up a lot. So here, this is Imam al-Ghazali on this issue. Okay, so okay, so Zarkashi says in al-Bahr al-Muhit, there's a big, large book on usul. He says, لا خلاف في عدم اقتضائه الفساد إذا لا تضاد بين الاعتداد بالشيء مع كونه مكروها وعلى ذلك بنى أصحابنا صحة الصلاة في الحمام وأعطان الإبل والمقبرة ونحوه مع القول بكراهتها. So the issue here is Allah is telling you to do something and telling you not to do something. So he says there's no debate um, among us regarding how the prohibition does not imply invalidity when there is no actual conflict between recognizing the action and it being makruh. So when there's no conflict, it's okay. And he says, for which reason our scholars, right, they say it's valid to pray, for example, in a bathhouse, i.e., so it's makruh to pray in a bathhouse because it's likely that there's najasa there. Or a'tan al-ibil, or in a place where a camel pen is likely to be filth. Well, maqbara, and in a graveyard is likely to have filth, and the like, even though it's offensive. Uh, لكن صرح الغزالي في المستصفى بجريانه في الكراهة. Now, so here's this about Imam Ghazali in the Mustasfa. Mustasfa is one of the four most important books in Usul. That the whole debate is still there between is it offensive or not. قال كما he said, Imam Ghazali said in the Mustasfa, كما يتضاد الحرام والواجب فيتضاد المكروه والواجب. So just as the obligatory and the haram are opposites, you can't have the two. An action in itself cannot be obligatory and sinful at the same time. Similarly, it cannot be makruh and obligatory at the same time, because that would be a conflict. Now, so here this is the words of Mustasfa. He says, فلا يدخل مكروه تحت الأمر حتى يكون مأمور به مكروها. Right? So he says, something that is offensive is not can never be a subcategory of something that's commanded to be done. So an action can't be so if you can imagine, we break down the categories of fiqh: haram and then not haram. Okay, so If it's haram, then obviously Allah is telling you not to do it. So therefore, if it's not haram, then Allah is telling you to do it. So therefore, makruh will be a subcategory of what is commanded to be done. That's one breakdown. Or you can say, no, it's either Allah's told you to do it or not to do it. If Allah's told you not to do it, it's either sinful or offensive, right? And so he's saying this, he's saying the same thing. It's like offensive. If it's something that's offensive in itself, then it's not going to be valid, right? And again, I'm mentioning this because there's countless scenarios in fiqh where we're going to see it, right? He says, إلا أن تنصرف الكراهية عن ذات المأمور إلى غيره, right? Unless we can separate somehow through this process by separating the offensiveness from the essence of the thing, of the action, to something else. كراهية الصلاة في الحمام وأعطان الإبل وبطن الوادي. Unless we can separate, put it something else, make it merely coincidental. So what we're going to do then as fuqaha in the Shafi fiqh is we're going to say haram or makruh, same thing. Is it essentially makruh? Yes. Invalid. Okay. Gargling while fasting, essentially makruh, therefore invalid, therefore not an excuse. Therefore, if you accidentally swallowed water, it would break your fast. Okay, but why? It was an accident. I know, but we didn't recognize it. It wasn't recognized. Talking after Isha, makruh, therefore not an excuse. Okay, you missed Fajr because you were speaking the whole night. Yes, not an excuse. You've sinfully missed the prayer. Huh? I didn't sinfully miss the prayer. I put my alarm clock. Yeah, but it was caused by something that was makruh and we didn't recognize it. So therefore, it was if you had no excuse. You see that, right? Um, should I say Bismillah if I eat? Okay, well, should I say Bismillah if I eat my left hand? Oh, it's makruh to eat with the left hand. Yeah, it's not makruh to eat though, is it? So are you looking at the essence of the action or something else about the action? So could you say Bismillah before something that's essentially makruh? No, wrong. You can't do that. But you could say say Bismillah before something that is accidentally makruh, such as eating with your left hand. So you're saying it before eating, not eating with your left hand. It's coincidental that you're doing something makruh at the same time, but that's just coincidental. Does that make sense? So these games, this is what we're going to have to do. It's very difficult then. We have to create our settings on a high level, our usuli settings, and then we have to apply them, right? Which is actually hard. And we're going to disagree on our usul, and we're going to disagree on our application of our usul. Am I making sense to everybody?
Yes, yeah.
Right? Just like, okay, we're both in the same political group, but we don't look at this thing in the same way. Right? Do all Democrats look at gender in the same way? Of course not. Right? Of course not. Right? And that's probably for other reasons as well. But let's say go back in the day, right? Say back in the day in England, for example, proper Labour Party. I don't know. Let's say, for example, in the 80s or 90s, like when we have like, Liberal Democrats or Labour Party versus Conservatives in England, right? There was like actual conservatives as opposed to now it's kind of like, right wing, left wing is a bit weird today anyway, but like actual proper right wing, right? Real actual conservatives versus somebody who's like, something else. Like there is. So now they're going to have clear fundamental philosophies that are different. But then when that person who shares your same philosophy, when you apply it to specifics, it comes out in a different way. That's fiqh, right? Same thing in hadith, right? These two scholars, they agree on the same principles of how to interact with hadith or how to critique hadith, but when they apply it, it's different. Happens all the time. So basically, he's saying when we say it's makruh to pray in a bathhouse, in a place of camels where there's camels potential that they could harm you, or in the pray in the middle of a valley where it's possible that there could be a flash flood or something like that. Now these are all we're going to say all because something that's coincidental. If I can't make it coincidental and it has to be peculiar to the action, then I have to say it's offensive. So our job as Tulab al-Ilm then is I'm reading and I'm saying, is this inconsistent or is this consistent? What's going on here? Right? Like I mentioned last week with Al-Kurdi saying that he said that if you did istikhara after Asr. Let's say you did Tahiyyat al-Masjid and then you did Istikhara after Asr. So he says you have a reason to allow the prayer and a reason to forbid it, so therefore it's forbidden, right? And so at the time, this is what, 10 years ago, I saw this and I'm like, question mark. That's our job as Tulab al-Ilm. Our job is not to come along and correct everything and say, oh, you're wrong, right? But it's to say, what's going on? This is ta'allum, this is learning, as opposed to, oh, the Sheikh said it, right? The Sheikh said it, that's not learning. Right? The text says it, that our job is to understand each and every sentence, like what's going on, right? So for example, we mentioned there's no difference between it being offensive or it being haram, as long as prohibited. So why is it that it's offensive to fast on a Saturday, but yet valid, and it's haram to pray on Eid, but yet valid? Isn't that an inconsistency? Right? It says, فإن قيل فلم صحت الصلاة في أوقات الكراهة ولم صحت الصلاة في الأماكن السبعة. Right? Uh, a mistake here. But anyway, so it says, what's the difference between praying in the makruh times and praying in these forbidden times? Praying in these forbidden places. It says, وَمَا الْفَرْقُ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَ النَّهِي عَنْ صَوْمِ يَوْمِ النَّحْرِ. What's the difference between you can't pray at those times and you can't fast on an Eid? قلنا من صحح هذه الصلوات لزمه صرف النهي عن أصل الصلاة والصف right. So he says, whoever says, like the Malikis and some of our scholars, if you say it's valid to pray after Asr or valid to pray after Fajr or valid to pray at these times, يجب لزمه صرف النهي عن أصل الصلاة وصفتها. You has to then say he has to basically put it into this category, right? He has to put it into this category, and not put it into this category. وقد اختلفوا في انعقاد الصلاة في الأوقات مكروهة لترددهم في أن النهي نهي عن إيقاع الصلاة من حيث إنه إيقاع صلاة أو أمر آخر مقترنا به. Right? And so he says in reality the Shafis then who debate this, is it valid or invalid? They're putting it's either here or here. So those who say it's valid, they put it here. And those who say it's invalid, they put it here, which is again problematic. Because why isn't it here? Right? So you say praying after Asr, is it because it's a prayer? Or is it because it's a praying after Asr? Right? So again, it's a problem. وأما صوم يوم النحر فقطع الشافعي رحمه الله ببطلانه لأنه لم يظهر انصراف النهي عن عينه ووصفه. And as for fasting on Eid, why did Imam Shafi categorically have one opinion on it? Because it was impossible to separate it in any other way. He had to put it in this category, and putting it into this category was just impossible. So he couldn't, عن انصراف النهي عن عينه, he couldn't separate it from this or from this. It's not possible to do this and not possible to do this. And then Az-Zarkashi mentions another place in the as well. مسألة المكروه هل يدخل تحت الأمر? Right? Just can the makruh be a subcategory of something commanded to be done? He says ومن فوائد الخلاف أيضا الصلاة في الأوقات المكروهة إذا قلنا إنها مكروهة كراهة تنزيه. Right? If we say this, so if we say that, so then he says, based on that, is it going to be valid or invalid? Right? He says, وفي صحتها تفريعا على هذا وجهان. He says, based on this, there's two opinions in the Shafi school. والقول بالبطلان وهو الأصح يخرج على أن المكروه لا يدخل تحت مطلق الأمر. And so saying that it's haram and invalid is based on the fact that المكروه لا يدخل تحت مطلق الأمر, right? And so he's saying that based on the fact that the makruh is cannot fit under the amr. It's not possible. Now, al-Maziri of the early Malikis as well, he said, innahu madhab Malik, right? So can you see now we can have a fruitful discussion between Malikis and Shafis and Shafis and Shafis between themselves and Malikis and Malikis between themselves. It's actually based on these discussions. And we can go back a step and start talking about usul again and come forward again and try and reassess it. But all of this is madhab fiqh. And so in the mind of, I don't know, somebody else, you're just doing taqleed, like you're just blindly following. And why aren't you following Quran and Sunnah? Say, I'm not blindly following anybody. Where's the blind following in any of this discussion? Right? Where's like all of this is deep discussions, right? What about this and what about this and what about I don't where's the blind following? As opposed to where's the organized thought? You just want chaotic thought because it's cheap and because you can direct it however you want. Right? Whereas we want directed thought, right? We want a system, A, B, and C, go in a direction. Khair, inshallah. So we went on a tangent today, my apologies, but it's important. We're going to see this again and again and again. And by default, then in the Shafi school, we don't, in the late school, we're not going back, but we are trying to see these two. If it's haram or makruh, is it here or is it here? Or is it here? Is it essentially makruh? Is it makruh because of something else? Is that coincidental or is that peculiar to it? Inshallah, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك